Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back again. We have a new one we're talking about today, right, Trace?
Yes, we do. So, this story was written and researched by Rebecca, and she is taking us back up into the UP with this story. So, let's get into it. This is Season 4, Episode 17, The Killing of Officer Kenneth Moraska. Norway, Michigan is a tiny town located in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, situated in Dickinson County. It sits just north of the Michigan-Wisconsin border, so it's way up there. It is surrounded by smaller towns with names like Felch and Vulcan. The nearest large town is Iron Mountain, with a population of just over 7,000, and was settled in the 1800s by Norwegian and Scandinavian immigrants that came to work in iron mines. It boasts a rich and vibrant Viking history. Viking ship replicas mark the entrance to the town of 2,774 people. So, guess what, Christine? We're round robining again.
Right? Yeah.
Right? So we got Iron Mountain. That was where Chris Reagan was murdered. And then, and actually, on one of our round robins, you were talking about the Vikings up in the UP. So here we go.
Yeah, where a lot of Michiganians get their traits from. And I don't mean it in a disparaging way at all. I love traits from all different cultures and people types. And I'm one of those strange birds that notice characteristics of people, and then I can trace those people back to where they're most likely from. And when you get larger, statuesque kind of people with thick hands, they're usually from Michigan because they go back to the lineage of the Vikings.
Right. And I think you said it was big knuckles or something.
Yeah, big knuckles, beefy hands, beefy hands, white men that have beefy hands. I will guarantee you they have Viking lineage.
Right.
And if they're in America, they're probably close to or from Michigan. Period. End of story. I don't care.
There you go.
It's my theory.
That's right. Oh, that's right.
But anyway, yeah, Iron Mountain was one of the key places for the Vikings.
Yep.
And I'm sticking to it. But yes, that's where all that came from, is when we were round robining about Iron Mountain.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we're Michiganders, not Michigonians.
Oh, whatever. I'm sorry, Michiganders.
Get it right.
But why not Michigonians?
Because of Michiganders appropriately the way we're labeled.
Okay.
You gotta be
all
nice.
Right. I will always honor whatever you say you're labeled as.
Thank you. This is a place we got to get up to. So every October, this town, Norway, celebrates the Leif Erikson Fall Festival with a parade, musical performances, and the unique funeral pyre boat burning on the night of the Viking. Surrounded by forests and streams, it is an outdoor enthusiast dream location. Whitewater rafting is a popular pastime on the Menominee River. Say that 3 times fast. Just south of town, which boasts craft shops, restaurants, and even has its own spring water bottling plant called the Norway Springs Bottling. It is also the home of the Norway Spring, an artisan water well discovered in 1903 while drilling for iron ore located on US 2. And if you go, take a jug or two with you and fill them up. People do this all the time, apparently. Now, Leif Erikson was also known as Leif the Lucky. He was a Norse explorer, thought to have been the first European to, quote, discover America long before Christopher Columbus. His father was Eric the Red. His name was due to his red hair and beard. Rebecca was absolutely right when she told me that she knows where Todd and I will be heading next October. I'm so down, and I know Todd would love it.
Of course, because Todd loves his Viking heritage.
Yes, he does.
And I love that.
Yep, me too. Now, the Norway Police Department is state of the art, offering accident investigation, crime prevention, juvenile investigations with specialized training, and a variety of other disciplines. But things were a bit different in the little town in May of 1971. The police department consisted of Chief Ed Mangini, Sergeant Clyde Banfield, and 2 police patrol officers, Patrolman Charles Braspenick and Officer Kenneth Moraska. The department had 1 shared patrol car. At night, there was no dispatch like we have today. If a person had an emergency, they would call the fire department. That was staffed 24 hours, 7 days a week, and they would then radio the officer on duty, or the officer on duty would stop by the fire department and check for messages. Isn't that crazy? Cracks me up.
We didn't have cell phones and all that back then.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that they'd have a secretary in the police department, but apparently not.
The fire department was the secretaries.
True. All right. The officer on duty the night of Saturday, May 23rd, 1971, was Officer Kenneth Moraska. Chief Mangini was worried Officer Moraska should have dropped the patrol car off at his house at 7 a.m. Well, it was after 7, and there was no sign of Moraska or the car. Officer Moraska had just celebrated his 26th birthday on May 11th. He was a tall, thin man with a crew cut, brown eyes, and a warm smile. He had been on the force for 2 years. Graduating from Norway High School in 1963, he then enlisted in the Army and also did a couple of years in Germany. He was married to his wife, Anne Marie, with whom he had a son, Dean. Chief Mangini knew Officer Moraska well, and he knew he was dependable and reliable. For him to not show up was totally out of character for the young officer. He remembered Officer Moraska had felt sick the week prior, thinking, heck, maybe he had gone home, and he was too ill to call in. Chief Mangini called Officer Moraska's home. When Mrs. Moraska answered, she too was worried. She had not seen nor heard from Ken since he had left for work the night before. It was unlike him to not come home or call. The chief decided to call City Hall and talk to the fire department. He spoke with fireman Arthur Swanson, who reported to the chief that he had seen Officer Moraska just before 3 a.m. At that time, he had told him of an urgent call requesting Officer Moraska come as soon as possible related to a domestic situation. Officer Moraska had taken down the information and driven off in the night. Any calls after that time that the fire department had tried to pass on had gone unanswered by the young patrolman. Leaving his house, the chief drove in his personal car to the police department. His worry grew because there was still no police car and there was still no Moraska. Calls were recorded in the radio log, actions taken, jotted down, but there was nothing after 3 a.m. He checked the address of the last call in the log. The address was on Peony Lane and belonged to Edward Alstein Sr. The chief knew there was trouble. There was always trouble with the Alsteins. He called in Sergeant Banfield, Officer Braspenick, and the Sheriff Department and the Michigan State Police. Trooper Peter Niska of the Michigan State Police had come on duty at 7 a.m. Stationed out of the state police post in Iron Mountain, Trooper Niska was at the police radio tower checking the generator. Now, this was a normal Sunday chore for the state police. At the time, all police radio calls were transmitted by the tower. So every Sunday, the generator was checked to make sure the tower would continue to work for another week. A 7-year veteran of the state police, Trooper Niska was glad to be in the Upper Peninsula. Having been stationed in the Lower Peninsula, he had been part of the police force during the 1967 riots just a few years before. A nice, quiet setting was what he wanted, and it was what he had until a call came over the radio at 8 a.m., quote, "Officer missing." Now, I talked about the 1967 riots in Detroit when we did the Robeson Massacre. I remember that. It was huge. It was awful. It was awful, and that's why everybody was, like, buying guns. It was like, we're never going to go through that crap again. 23-year-old Ed Alstein Jr. was a very troubled young man. He was born September 27th, 1947. Not much is known about his home life growing up or what he was like as a child. But as an adult, he couldn't hold down a job. He had problems in his marriage. He dabbled in drugs, especially LSD, and he liked to drink and party. He had a record of violence against his former wife, and he was staying at his dad's house after his divorce, and he wasn't happy about that. He had a reputation around town, and it wasn't as a saint. And he did not like Officer Moraska. In fact, Ed blamed him for the troubles he was having with his ex-wife. It was Officer Moraska who had arrested Ed in February for drunk and disorderly conduct, which he believed caused his wife to leave him and file for divorce.
It was Officer Moraska's problem. His drunk and unruly and probably wife-beating ways was the problem of the arresting officer. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, it's never my fault.
Priceless. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt. That just tickled me. I love that.
I know.
I love how people just twist things and never take accountability for their own fucking shit and then blame it on someone else when they're actually the person trying to help you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry. That was too tickling to let go by that quickly. Okay. So he blames the officer because he's an asshole. Go ahead.
Yep. It's his fault. All right, so that Saturday night, Ed went to a teenage dance on the second floor of the Coast to Coast Teen building. Ed danced, played pool with some friends, and hung out with some of his buddies. He later met up with his pal Slim Fleming. Now, that's not his real name, okay? But it was in the article, right? So they're protecting this guy's identity. So Slim was well known to local law enforcement as a troublemaker, drug dealer, and user. The two went back to Alstein's house, probably did some drugs there. Then Fleming took Alstein to the Norway Hotel. Now, at the bar there in the hotel, Alstein began drinking more and played more pool. Before he left, he bought a couple of 6-packs of beer, which he took with him. A relative picked him up and brought him to his father's home on Peony Lane about 2 a.m. Knowing Officer Moraska was on duty that night, having seen him on patrol earlier, and feeling his hatred smolder, Alstein called the fire department asking for assistance in a domestic matter, and he specifically asked for Officer Moraska. While Officer Moraska drove through the dark night to his home, Alstein loaded his father's deer rifle and hid himself behind a woodpile in the yard. He silently watched as Officer Moraska exited his car in the dark, walked to the front door, and found it locked. He watched him walk to the back door and climbed up the stairs of the small square cement porch. The light was on, and Officer Moraska knocked on the door. Alstein fires. He fired once from his position at the woodpile, then walked up to Officer Moraska and cold-bloodedly reached down, removed the officer's service revolver, and shot him again at point-blank range in the head. He then fled into the night in the patrol car. Dickinson County Sheriff Gerard, his deputies, and the state police arrived at the Norway Police Department. A search was planned and organized. Men were sent to check various logging trails and parking lots in the hope that Officer Moraska had gotten too ill to return to the station or that his car had broken down in the woods. Logging trails were common in this area, and officers would patrol them looking for illegal activity at night. Word had spread through the small town of the officer's strange disappearance, and calls came into the station, one after another, from people claiming to have seen the young officer. But even then, nobody can place him anywhere after 3 a.m. The chief thought it strange that someone calling the fire department for assistance from the police would specifically ask for a particular officer by name. I mean, you make the call, you tell them that you have a problem and that you need an officer to respond, period. So Chief Mangini thought that perhaps Arthur Swanson, the man at the fire department who took the call, maybe they made a mistake. Maybe the person did just ask for an officer on duty to respond. So when Chief Mangini finally got a hold of Swanson, he said, quote, "Are you sure that the party who called early this morning asking that an officer be sent to the Alstein residence wanted Moraska to respond to the call? Or did the individual who called merely ask for an officer to come?" Swanson said, quote, "He asked for Officer Moraska. I remember his exact words. He said, 'Have Ken Moraska come over to the house as soon as he can.' Then he hung up." Well, that conversation solidified it. It was time to swiftly move and call for more help. The chief reached out to the sheriff's department at Iron Mountain, as well as the Michigan State Police. After Chief Mangini explained the situation and that Moraska was missing, he was promised that he had their support and that they would help immediately and bring as many officers as they had. Trooper Niska and Sergeant Banfield were sent to the Alstein residence on Peony Lane. Chief Mangini had driven past it on his way to the station just after 7 a.m., but nothing was noticeable from the road, so he had continued to the station. As Trooper Niska pulled into the driveway and parked on the side of the house, all looked quiet and calm. There was no patrol car to show that Officer Moraska was there or in trouble. The two men left their vehicle and walked toward the house. Trying the front door, they found it was locked, so repeating Officer Moraska's steps of a few hours before, they walked around to the back of the house. There, the sight of Officer Moraska's legs sticking up over the porch platform met them. As they approached the porch, guns drawn, they could see blood. They had found the young officer. He was dead, down by 2 bullets, one to the left side, one to his head, both shots fatal. His car and his service pistol missing. They cleared the house, and Sergeant Banfield called his chief, quote, "We found him, and he was at Alstein's place. He's dead, shot twice in the head. You better get over here as quick as you can. There's a lot of officers around, men from the sheriff's department and the state police." When Chief Mangini arrived, he made his way to the porch. He was told that, quote, "Nothing has been touched. I didn't want anyone messing around until you came." As the chief observed Moraska's lifeless body, he saw that his clothes were soaked through with blood and that his officer was lying in a large pool of blood as well. Alstein was missing, and they had no idea where he had gone. A cop killer was in the wind and could be just about anywhere. While the police departments organized their search, Alstein, drunk and probably still high, not knowing what he was doing or where he was going. He drove the patrol car 7 miles to Benton Lake, then back to Norway, then to the small town of Felch, then to the city of Escanaba, where he stopped at a gas station and put gas into the patrol car. He managed to convince the clerk on duty that although he was not in uniform, he was a member of the Norway Police Department, and if the station sent the department a bill, the department would pay for his gas. He even signed the receipt. After leaving the gas station, he drove back to Felch and on a back road near Arnold, Michigan, found a cabin owned by the William Fraser family. Hiding the patrol car in the woods, he then shut the lock off the door and entered. He was armed with 2 guns and now had shelter in the woods.
Okay, so please tell me that the gas station attendant made a phone call to the police department and said, "Hey, I have some junkie here getting gas in one of your patrol cars." Please tell me that happened.
I'd love to tell you that happened, but he didn't.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
What kind of chucklehead gas station attendant is just going to see? I'm assuming that he looked like a disheveled drug addict. I'm assuming that he's in a drug-addled delirium right now because he just shot a cop in cold blood and then is just lollygagging around in the police officer's patrol car, which I'm assuming is marked. I don't understand. I'm not understanding this. I don't understand how the gas station attendant was like, "Okay, let's call the sheriff."
Yeah, like, this doesn't feel right, and you still smell like alcohol.
Right?
He's partying all night.
Yeah, no, none of that makes sense to me. And what kind of chucklehead is this gas station attendant?
A real chucklehead.
Yeah, you have to be like the dumb of the dumb. Oh, okay. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just like blown away. Like, wait, what? So immediately they called, and then now they know where he's at. But no, that's not what you're about to tell me. You're about to tell me that this goes on for longer.
It goes on for a little bit longer. Yep.
Oh, geez. Okay.
All right. Okay. So the house on Peony Lane became a hub of activity, as you can imagine. It was determined that the senior Edward Alstein was out of town, and only his son was there that weekend. Officers from various departments and agencies converged there and at the station as the news of the killing had spread. After the body of Officer Moraska was removed, Chief Mangini returned to the station and alerted departments in more jurisdictions to be on the lookout for Alstein and the missing patrol car, which was marked, right? Departments in Wisconsin also joined the search in case he headed south. Due to having such a heavily forested area to cover, the Michigan Department of Natural Resources sent out all available DNR officers to assist in the hunt. The sheriff and some of his deputies headed toward the smaller towns where the missing patrol car had been reportedly seen. But nobody could say for certain if it had been the missing car. The DNR and other departments checked the logging trails for new tire impressions showing a vehicle had recently driven down the roads. Roadblocks were set up all over the Upper Peninsula and the Michigan-Wisconsin border. But there was no sign of the missing Alstein or the patrol car. This would be the most massive manhunt the Upper Peninsula had ever seen. One of the men that came back to assist was Detective Sergeant Edwin Hill. But prior to arriving to the police station to speak with Chief Mangini, Sergeant Hill stopped at the hospital where Moraska's body had been taken. He spoke with a physician who had just completed the officer's autopsy. Hill learned that Moraska had been shot twice. One bullet entered his left earlobe, entering his head, and the other went through the left arm, and the bullet was lodged in his chest. The physician also stated that either one of these shots alone would have killed him. The physician also showed Detective Hill a spent .38 casing that was found in Moraska's shirt when he started the autopsy. Moraska also had gunshot powder burns from the headshot. The type of bullet found in his chest was a .32, and that casing had been found on the ground where Alstein fired the first shot. Then the call came in. The hamlet of Watson, Michigan lies about an hour northeast of Norway. A woman had spotted the missing patrol car on her way to church. The Marquette State Police Post dispatched a search plane and tracking dogs were brought out, and the search shifted to that direction, or in that direction. But they still couldn't find Alstein or the patrol car, right? Then another call came in for Chief Mangini from the chief of police in Escanaba. A man had called into the Escanaba department from the gas attendant, where Alstein had stopped for gas after ruthlessly gunning down Moraska. So he was a chucklehead, but I guess he just wasn't connecting the dots initially, right? He had told the chief that initially he thought it was super weird that the man driving the police car had a rifle in the back seat and a handgun in the back pocket of his jeans. But then, because, the man signed the receipt for gas and said to charge it to the Norway Police Department, he just figured, okay, this dude's an officer, and didn't think any more about it until the following day when the word on the street was that an officer in Norway had been killed. But one thing the attendant did do was watch the man in the patrol car pull out of the gas station and head west on US 2 and 41. Now, we know that Alstein was found in a hideout in someone's cabin in the woods. Well, that cabin belonged to the Fraser family, as I mentioned, and it was spring after all, and the Frasers all piled into their car with their children, heading north to open up the cabin and get that baby ready for the season. They excitedly pulled into the cabin driveway in Arnold, Michigan, 5 minutes from Watson around noontime. They wondered about the extra police presence they saw, but didn't give it too much thought as they were making their way to their cabin. They were going to have a relaxing day in preparation for a long week of school and work. Memorial Day had just been declared a federal holiday that year, and that would happen to fall on the 31st. It was a good time to open the cabin after a long winter so they could relax on this new upcoming holiday. Mr. Fraser pulled into the driveway, and his 3 children excitedly jumped out of the car and ran to the cabin, with their parents following slowly behind them. As they approached the cabin, they noticed the lock on the door had been shot off, and at the same time as the door opened, a stranger brandishing 2 guns at the family. He motioned with the guns for the Frasers to move behind an old truck parked in the driveway and told Mr. Fraser to throw those keys into the woods. As the family complied, the man took off running into the woods. The Fraser family ran the other way and reported the incident to the police. Chief Mangini was notified and that the officers were closing in. Police swarmed the area, and shortly after 2 p.m., the Stevenson State Police Post commander was driving down the road. As he drove, he spotted Alstein coming out of the woods. A call went out over his radio that Alstein had been found. Knowing he had been spotted, he dropped his weapons on the forest floor. Alstein was surrounded by officers as he exited the woods. He remained silent as Trooper Niska approached him and put the handcuffs on. It was over. The cop killer was found. Officer Moraska was laid to rest in the Norway Township Cemetery with full military and police honors. In 2001, the section of US 2 in Norway was named the Kenneth J. Moraska Memorial Highway. He is the only officer to be killed in the line of duty in the history of the Norway Police Department. Ed Alstein did write up a confession, and he was found guilty of murder in the 2nd degree and is serving a life sentence in the Algar County Correctional Facility in Munising, Michigan, 2 hours northeast of where he committed his crime. He works with a program training unadoptable dogs to be adoptable. His numerous requests for parole have been repeatedly denied. Like, you're a cop killer, dude. You're not getting out. I was wondering why in the heck this guy was found guilty of 2nd-degree murder, because, to me, this was planned, which would be 1st degree. In the sources for the show, you will find the People versus Alstein docket number 13491, page 243. And reading it, sounds like Alstein's plan was to basically beat up Officer Moraska, but in the moment, Alstein changed his mind and he decided that he would kill him instead. And guess what? I'm not buying that. Because after calling the fire department and requesting Officer Moraska to respond to a domestic situation, he grabbed his father's rifle and loaded it before heading outside to the woodpile to wait for Officer Moraska to arrive. And that right there, that's 1st degree.
Just going to say, I didn't want to interrupt you, but the premeditation was in the fact that he laid in wait in the bushes with a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
That totally sounds like 1st degree. But apparently he had a good enough attorney that kind of spun it and probably used his drug addiction and his drunkenness to, I don't know, to say that he was temporarily insane or something. Like, I don't know. What did they say about that? This wasn't premeditated because he was drunk and high at the time? Because I feel like that should not be allowable.
Yeah.
It's like you chose to do the drugs. You knew it was going to make you crazy. At least you assumed it was going to make you different, some kind of euphoria, because that's why you were doing the drugs and alcohol in the first place, right? Was to chase this euphoria. So if you're chasing this euphoria, you get what you get. And what you did was 1st-degree murder, my friend. So you should fry for it, or at least in Michigan, sit there for the rest of your life for it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Alstein is serving the rest of his life in prison. Like, he is in prison. Like, his sentence is like a 1st degree because he's serving life without the chance of parole, right? So, either way, the 2nd-degree sentence is pretty much like his 1st-degree sentence because he's never getting out of prison. He's a cop killer. But I still think it should have been 1st degree. Okay. I would also like to read to you a couple of paragraphs from the testimony. So from the transcript, Dr. Emery E. Ulrich took the stand. He was Alstein's psychiatrist. He testified that Alstein's, quote, was suffering from acute brain syndrome due to the combined effect of alcohol and LSD, and that this was a reversible disorder. He also stated that Alstein was incapable of forming the intent to kill and exhibited unawareness of any object in carrying out a planned activity. He went on to say that Alstein, quote, was under considerable stress because of his loneliness, his wife's absence, and his perceived rejection. Another psychiatrist on the people's side, a Dr. Leon J. Quinn, described Alstein, quote, as one suffering from delirium. He said Alstein, quote, was suffering from a character or personality disorder and not from an acute brain syndrome at the time of the killing. Delirium is not considered a mental illness, and it does not impair one's ability to distinguish from right and wrong, nor does it affect the ability to resist action upon impulse. I mean, delirium is basically a serious change in mental ability. It's characterized by confusion in thinking and lack of awareness of your surroundings. It can come on fast or within hours or over the course of a couple of days. Precipitating factors can be one or many, such as a severe or long-term illness, low sodium brought on by certain medications, infections, surgery, or alcohol and drug use or withdrawal from alcohol or drugs. So there you go. One doc's trying to give him a diagnosis. The other one's like, no. He's withdrawn. So he did know what he was doing. So there you go.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I get a little judgy when it comes to people that are doing drugs and alcohol in excess. I don't feel like their mental capacity while they're under the influence should be taken into account for any crimes that they commit. I think their wherewithal and their mental capacity before they took the drugs and alcohol is where, at least from a legal standpoint, we should focus. And yes, this guy may have been depressed because he didn't have his wife. And obviously he's depressed if he's self-medicating with drugs and alcohol and probably maybe some other mental incapacities or what have you. But when it comes to the legal system, I don't believe we should take into account the mental abilities or ineptitudes, disabilities, while they're inebriated. This human being made the decisions to impair themselves. So any decisions that they make during that impairment, they should be held accountable for 150%.
Yeah, it's like they use it as an excuse. Oh, it was the drugs, it was the alcohol.
Yeah, but you made the decision to do the drugs. Mm-hmm. So, ergo, still your decision, my friend.
Yeah.
Still your absolute decision.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, I've been pretty damn impaired a time or two. And I've never, ever gone to the dark side like that. I've never thought, oh, well, I'm gonna kill this son of a bitch because A, B, C, D, and E. So it's a character. It's this person's innate character. He's a bad dude. And I don't know what all he did to his wife, but I'm sure it was pretty bad. You know what I mean? I'm sure he probably was physically abusive. He was, could you imagine having a husband drinking and dropping LSD all the time? Like, that's not a way to live.
I do believe that alcoholism and drug addiction is a disease. I do believe that it's a disease. I mean, hello, we're nurses. So I'm well aware that it is a disease. The addiction itself is a disease. However, that disease aside, your character and your choices are still yours. You still need to be held accountable for them. And hopefully by taking accountability and understanding the decisions, the choices, and the ramifications of them, that will propel you into fighting your addiction successfully. However, I know I'm going off case because this guy, he murdered, so he's life in prison, so there is no coming back from it. But for those that are listening and they're thinking about situations they've had with drug addiction or alcoholism or being a victim of it in one way or another, that's where lines get blurry. And we're like, do we blame the drugs and alcohol or do we blame the person? And the thing is it's not really about blame. It's about taking accountability for it, whether or not you were under the influence, whether or not they were under the influence. They still did it. The consequences must still apply regardless. Does that make sense, or am I going way off?
Makes sense to me. You know, I mean, Kenneth Moraska had just turned 26. I'm sure his child at home was probably an infant, if not a toddler. You killed a cop. You know what I mean? Look at all the lives this guy destroyed because, he was hell bent on getting back at this officer because it was all Moraska's fault of all his personal problems with his wife. Just nonsense.
Yeah, well, that's a classic sign, too, of people that are self-medicating. Everything is everyone else's fault but their own. And I really do I think maybe that's why I'm, like, being triggered by this a little bit, is, we all have people in our family that self-medicate in one way or another. We all have addicts of some kind that we are either closely connected to or care about. And the thing is that as family members and people that love and care for people that choose to do these things or are inflicted with these diseases, all of that is very valid. I'm not invalidating any of that. But we tend to feel sorry for them and really want to help them. And in some cases, we even enable them because we keep excusing it because of the drugs and alcohol. The problem with that is there's never any accountability, and things can get to this nature where they end up doing something like this guy and murder someone because they're so far into their victimology of themselves. Do you know what I mean? They're always a victim. Addicts like to be the victim. It's always, oh, feel bad for me. Woe is me. I have all these things, and that's why I lash out, and that's why I do these horrible things. We as a society have to be better for just holding people accountable and making people realize that no matter what influence at the time, you do what you do and you got to pay the piper.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And
there's no sugarcoating it or pussyfooting around. So, yeah, I agree with you. This should have been first-degree murder, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It was only second-degree because they brought in the drugs and alcohol, made him do it, instead of him choosing to do the drugs and alcohol and then choosing to do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't drugs and alcohol. It's kind of like when people talk about guns. Not guns that kill people. People kill people. It's not the guns, it's the people.
Exactly. And you want to know something really cool? Do you?
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, our researcher writer, Rebecca, her father was involved in this case.
Oh, that is cool.
Very cool. And, he's an older fella at this point. So maybe, just maybe, we'll get lucky enough to have him on our round robin when we do this.
That'd be cool, like a total insider's viewpoint. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool.
Yeah, I just got goosebumps. So, I know she's talking to her dad about it, and hopefully he'll agree to be on the show. We can ask him some great questions. So keep your fingers crossed that he'll do the show with us on Round Robin. I'm excited at the possibility of it. So
that would be cool. So for everybody listening, stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, we're going to manifest that he's going to do the show with us. Yep. So, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming back and listening. As always, we appreciate you. Have a great week, and we will see you on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.